I was always a builder, building tree houses as a kid. I mean, I knew I'd eventually get into some sort of architecture or building or working with my hands, but also kind of working with my mind a little bit too. And I think that's where I moved maybe away from architecture more into art. And I wasn't sure, if that would, lend itself to a career, but I just kind of kept following that muse and following what was in my heart. A lot of it was when I went to apprentice with Paul Granlund. I realized that artists do work. Artists are career-driven. Artists are professionals. That there is a place for them in this world of work, and I believe that artists can play a role and sit at the cultural round table and contribute their creativity to. For me, it's public art. It just kind of slowly, with the public art commissions, lended itself to actually making it a career, just going from project to project, working with different city entities. The muse or the hobby then became really a profession. Yes, so right now I'm building the framework for the Green Bay vessel. So this is a 3-inch rectangular tubing, and these two will match up against each other. Getting into public art, I started out as the object maker, the sculptural pieces on a pedestal, and I think when I got out to Montana State, the mantra there was go big or go home, so I started increasing the scale of my work, and I started to see it outside the gallery walls, and where can art and spaces in between buildings share common ground. And I think that's where community happens. It's those spaces in between buildings where people encounter sculptural objects or artwork, and that's what kind of brings a life or a spirit or a soul to a town. And once I got one commission, it kind of led to another one, and pretty soon, I started to kind of read that a lot of these cities are trying to reinvent themselves or bring the arts into their towns or their city centers, where public art really does bring a draw. It allows people to kind of connect with each other. It's a place of common gathering. And I guess I'm more interested in art that can serve a social need, maybe almost more than art in the gallery walls. Art out in there in the streets is kind of, I guess, where I belong. Yeah, so the process for me, particularly with the public art, is I'm on these listservs. I get weekly email lists of this city is looking for a piece, or this fire station needs a sculpture, or this library is looking for work, and I sift through those weekly and see where I might connect with a certain city or a certain subject matter. They often give you that sort of 2-3 month window of coming up with an idea, and I often find myself, really researching the city's history. What makes a community unique? What puts them on the map? Or what is it that resonates with the city? Or what do people like to do in their community? And I'm just asking myself a lot of questions and research. And so it's almost time in the library as much as it is at the drawing board, finding that connection point. They often take almost a year from the time where you submit your credentials to getting the final proposal approved. And with city government, things kind of have to go through certain processes, and oftentimes I have to work with a structural engineer maybe to get concrete footings licensed and stamped and approved. And then there's the building of the piece, so it's a slow process. Yeah, I've been working with the city of Grand Rapids for probably over a year now, and the call was for a sculpture that would sit along Crystal Lake. And in my research, I learned that Crystal Lake in Grand Rapids was literally the water source where they had harvest ice, back before refrigeration. That harvesting tool is those ice tongs that they would use to pull. And I went to the Historical Society in Itasca County, and they were really helpful with providing me some images of what those historic sort of tongs look like. And I just got intrigued by that form. Again, that interest in metal and tools, and just I thought the elegance of that ice tong itself lended itself to a sculptural application. So the pieces outside are an exaggerated scale of those ice tongs, and then those will constitute a place, again, sort of a playful element, a swing-like element, that so viewers can kind of engage with the piece, and then the swings kind of face out over Crystal Lake. The reward is, that final installation where you finally bring something to fruition and you see some community engagement with it. You feel like you've done something to kind of, again, sit at that cultural round table with a community. This is reclaimed metals, and then the wood in the middle is reclaimed from when West Highway 61 in Grand Marais was redone. They had to take down elm trees, and so we worked with the city on some artists and craftspeople reclaiming some of those elm tree saplings and integrating them into artworks. It's kind of an homage or a way of kind of acknowledging the trees. The trees didn't have a lot of say in the controversy of, do we take down the trees to build the new highway, and what trees can be saved? And so it's kind of a commentary on the trees stand stoic and silent and become part of this abstraction. The ideas for the assemblage work is, that's a little more intuitive and instinctive, which I kind of like that side of it. I've been talking about public art, and it's very methodical and design oriented and goes through a lot of hoops. This is kind of a breather for me, working in assemblage. I scavenge our local salvage yard. I'm always keeping my eyes open for reclaimed materials, and those kind of dictate the form. I'll start to collect them. The other building has, you can see some of the salvage over here, different pieces and parts and fragments that somehow resonate with me. It's very instinctive and intuitive, and there's no drawings done ahead of time and no planning, unlike the public work. So it's a nice balance of that playful other side that artists also enjoy, that creative moment. Also, I think, some of the works that use reclaim, I think I have a soft spot for the neglected and the worn, and the metal that has history and oxidation, and paint that's been sort of slowly lending itself into rust, and I just find a beauty in that palette and kind of rebreathe life back into those materials as well. So it's just an instinct and intuition that's the material that I connect with. I think it's somehow honoring those materials that have a history or a story are really interesting to me, and if I can bring them out of their what's considered refuse or castaways, and if I can bring them back to life or introduce a new life to them, that's kind of the challenge I kind of give myself with the more abstract assemblage type work. I source my metal from locally. Big Joe's Salvage here in Tofty has kind of given me the green light to go in and rummage through, and if I pull something out, I just kind of let them know that I'm down there, and it's really a gold mine down there. That's a real local source, but I'm always keeping my eyes open. I just happened to drive by the Department of Transportation shredding facility, where they take old highway signs and they shred them, because by law that's what they have to do when they're worn or weathered, or there's a shotgun hole through the sign. And I just cold called and said, you ever let artists kind of come in and reclaim these materials? And I thought it'd be a long process, but the DOT engineer signed off on it, and they let me go in there for a day and just start pulling colors and worn materials out of their facility. So it's just kind of keeping my eyes open, and it's not uncommon that I'll be gone for a weekend and drive into my driveway, and there'll be some random object sitting in the driveway with a note, hey Greg, I thought maybe you could use this. So advice for young artists, it's work. It's showing up every day. There's a romantic side to it and a creative side that's beautiful. But when it comes down to it, it's do you have that work ethic inside of you where you have to show up every day, and even when the work's going badly, we want to create these beautiful things every day, or be acknowledged by our work. And there's a lot of days where there's no acknowledgement, and there's failures, and there's mistakes, and there's insecurity. Like, is this good enough? Is this going to be, is this at a level of craft and a level of concept that's going to resonate with others? So do you have what it takes inside to kind of play with that unromantic side, where it's just the day-to-day work? But if it's in you, if it's in your heart, which it was for me, and you keep following it, and as scary as it is, things do sort of open up, and opportunities do arise. if you kind of stay true to what's inside.